Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude. No, I'm not going to give you a question. I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir,
go ahead.
Can you state categorically that nobody... No, Mr. President-elect, that's not appropriate.
Hello, I'm Hat, and welcome to Hat's Guerrilla News. I'm starting a new series today called Armed Citizen. Armed Citizen is from the column by the same name in the NRA's American Rifleman magazine. These stories will give you a good idea of how many times people like you and me with a gun can defend themselves and others against bodily harm or even death. According to an Obama-era study that was never published because it didn't fit his narrative, guns are used in self-defense between 300,000 and 2 million times a year. That is orders of magnitude more often than guns are used in assaults, even if you factor in the deadly cities like Chicago, Detroit, New Orleans, Oakland, etc. With that said, let's take a look at these stories and give ourselves an idea about how people just like you and me can arm ourselves and be better prepared to deal with the people out there who do not want to do us well, but want to do us harm. These are important to know and important to share with others. This will help bolster the good guy with a gun narrative that is so sorely being pummeled by the likes of Emma Gonzalez and David Hogg and the other gun grabbers out there who know nothing about what it takes to really be prepared in today's society. Now that the preamble's out of the way, let's get to it. First up is an article from the Beacon News, published out of Aurora, Illinois, and dated March 1st, 2018. Just seeing an armed citizen, I have a lot of trouble with that word, citizen with an AR-15 in his hands was enough to cause a knife-wielding assailant to stop his assault on a pregnant woman in Kendall County, Illinois. That's west of Chicago. He was half a breath away from getting his head blown off, and he knew that, the protective neighbor said, after he used America's most popular semi-automatic rifle to thwart the attack. And remember, you don't need an AR-15 to defend yourself. That's no. Like Joe Biden said, a double-barrel shotgun will be just fine. Why they have to determine what you need to defend yourself, they can't explain. But to go on. The mother-to-be had ordered a pizza and had gone outside to wait for the delivery driver. While she was standing by, a tenant from her apartment complex started a heated discussion with her. As the argument escalated, the woman's husband came out to see what was going on. The assailant pulled a knife and stabbed the husband, nicking the woman with the same swipe of the blade. Shouting, including a threat to kill the woman's baby, ensued. Seriously. The term animal? I'm sorry. He has a divine spark. So, yeah, just because he threatened to kill a baby doesn't mean he's not a totally good person. That caught the attention of a neighbor who works as a private security officer. He looked to see what was going on, saw blood in the hallway, and grabbed his AR-15. Upon seeing the rifle, the assailant bolted. Police arrived soon thereafter and tracked down the suspect. Good for them. Bad for him. Our second story is out of Atlanta, Georgia, and it's dated 3/14/2018. A storytelling criminal thought he could turn the tables after an armed citizen foiled his attempted carjacking, but it didn't take long for law enforcement officers to see through his charade. Or do you say charade? In Fulton County, Georgia, an armed thug blocked a woman's car in her driveway when she was trying to take her grandson to a medical appointment. He said, "Whose car is this? Give me the keys," the grandmother told a Fox 5 reporter. Rather than complying, the woman started screaming. Fortunately, her son heard her calls for help and came out with a gun. He fired at the bad guy multiple times, hitting him at least once. The assailant drove off to a fire station where he spun a yarn about being the victim of an interstate shooting. The police dotted his tail and arrested him. No charges were filed against the armed citizen. There's that word again. And again, that's out of Fox 5 Atlanta. Next up, Ferndale, Washington, dated 3/5/2018. Early morning noises outside of his home woke up a Ferndale, Washington resident. The homeowner armed himself before going outside to investigate the source of the disturbance. The armed citizen noticed a broken window in his garage, and then he saw a stranger. The interloper threw himself to the ground after noticing that he had been discovered. Kind of like a rabbit. When you catch it in your headlights, what's the first thing it does? It freezes. That's a natural response of prey. The homeowner called 911 and held the suspect at gunpoint until the authorities arrived. Now, let's just assume that this guy did not have a gun and the intruder panicked and attacked him. Where would he have been? Because the police are minutes away. Remember, average police response times between 3 and 5 minutes at best. And if you live out in the county and you have to wait for the sheriff, that deputy who's available for you could be all the way on the other side of the county by the time he gets your call. That can be at least a half hour to an hour away, at least. I know this because I shoot with deputies all the time, and they tell me about these things. So if you have something you can use to hold an intruder at bay until the authorities arrive, all's the better. Otherwise, they're going to get away if they don't attack you, and they'll be able to break in, attack, or murder someone else just minutes down the road without anyone being the wiser. This next one is from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, dated 3/6/18. Some criminals might believe that a numerical advantage is enough to come out ahead during a home invasion, but that doesn't always hold true when the victims exercise their Second Amendment right. 3 thugs kicked down a back door during a daylight break-in at a Baker, Louisiana home one day, thinking the odds were in their favor. It was a 3-against-1 situation, and they used metal pipes to beat the resident. Again, you're not always going to be attacked with a gun or even a knife, but having superior weapons in your favor makes the outcome much better. Could you imagine only having a baton, a bat, something like that to beat off 3 people who are wielding the same caliber of weapon as you? You're not going to come out ahead unless you're Steven Seagal and everything's completely choreographed in your favor. So yeah, having a gun, good idea. But a stalwart citizen proved that one with a gun can take on 3, wounding one of the aggressors critically and sending the others scurrying off. Police were seeking the others. Now here's the thing, where you have 3 individuals breaking in, one of them gets shot and captured. The others run away, leaving him to possibly die on the floor of the house they just broke into. What are the odds that person is going to be so tight-lipped about his friends that he's not going to roll over on them? Fairly small. There's that street saying, snitches need stitches. Yeah, that holds true sometimes, but when you realize that your buddies don't care enough about you to try to get you to a hospital after you've been nearly blown away, maybe your loyalty to them might be tested a little bit. I'm just saying. Okay, now we're going to Winchester, Virginia. This appeared in the Winchester Star on 3/5/2018. When a Clearbrook, Virginia resident saw an intruder's hands reaching through his bedroom window, he fired his 12-gauge shotgun, killing the interloper. This is the only incident in this column where the assailant was killed. Sometimes, as you've seen, they weren't even shot at, much less hit. So wielding a gun, displaying a gun, can be just as effective as firing and hitting someone with it. Just keep that in mind. You don't have to put a bullet into someone to save yourself or someone else from bodily harm or death. Deputies found the suspect dead in the yard after they responded to a 911 call when the homeowner reported the shooting. And again, deputies. So he was out in the county, not in a city precinct where he would have been subject to more swift response by police officers. Our penultimate story comes from Greenville, South Carolina, and is dated 3/20/2018. In South Carolina, an alleged burglar who broke a window and tried to enter a Greenville County home was shot by the armed homeowner. Again, a county resident, not a city resident, and being broken into through a window. Even if you lock all your windows, that may not deter someone from doing their best to put a hole in it and unlocking it and coming through. It's not the best idea because it alerts the homeowner, but they may not think you're there. Such is the worse for them if you are, and armed properly. Police documents say the suspect was armed with a knife and threatened the lives of the people in the home before one of them shot in self-defense. The trespasser, who was charged with burglary and related crimes, is reported to have been released from jail on parole several weeks before the incident. So here we have a beautiful case of recidivism, in full force. And recidivism, if you're not familiar, is the constant breaking of the law by an individual, even though they have been arrested, charged, found guilty, and jailed / put in prison for a period of time. They just don't learn. Some people thrive in the controlled atmosphere of jail and want to go back. Unfortunately, they often harm the law-abiding populace at large in the process. These things need to be stopped, and an armed citizen can do that quite effectively. Okay, here's the last one. It's dated March 27th of this year, and it's out of Houston, Texas. Houston police were investigating a case in which a woman used a gun to fend off 3 attackers who ambushed her in her driveway. Again, 3-on-1. You're going to find situations where you are outnumbered. You need to be prepared for that. Going to the range and shooting at a stationary target at 21 feet or 10 feet, whatever, that's not enough. You need to train with dynamic situations. You need to train in getting space between you and your attackers and then engaging them with your firearm, or getting enough space between you and them to get the hell out of there. Just run away. No one says you have to stand your ground and start blasting away if you can disengage and save yourself that way. The longer you're in a fight, the more dangerous it is for you, because someone can get the upper hand, even for a moment. And if you haven't practiced firearm retention, then it could be turned on you. So again, train dynamically. Don't just stand there and put holes in targets all day. It's decent practice, but it's not enough. So, fend off 3 attackers who ambushed her in her driveway. The resident arrived home in the overnight hours. Again, be vigilant. Keep your head on a swivel. Don't allow yourself to have tunnel vision between where you're going and where you're coming from and where you're going. Always be looking around. That'll give you an advantage over people trying to ambush you. Sometimes, if they just see that you see them first, they'll freeze, giving you extra time. Or they'll bolt, leaving you safe and allowing you to get into a secure location and call the police and let them know someone tried to attack you. If they can get there quickly enough, they can surround the neighborhood and track these people down, especially if they have a canine or 2. Those are incredibly effective, as long as the weather conditions are right and they're not picked up by someone with a car before the police can close the dragnet on them. 3 masked men jumped her as soon as she exited her car. The woman's mother, who was in the house, noticed the scuffle and called 911. The victim somehow got away from her assailants and took refuge inside the house. Dynamic situation. That wasn't enough to deter the troublemakers who tried to force their way into the home after her. The police often say, "We don't catch the smart ones." And here's a prime example of that. She's in the house. She now has the ability, possibly, to defend herself with a weapon of some type. If she has a firearm, even better. When you're coming through a door, you're exposed. There's only a small space for you to come in. And someone with a gun pointed at that space can pick you off one by one as you come through, even through the door. Just remember, if they're breaking down the door, you're allowed to shoot through it. You don't have to wait for them to come into the house before you start blasting away. Now, that is, of course, dependent upon your local ordinances. In my area, there is the castle defense, where you're allowed to defend your home without them coming into your home. You may live in a state or a municipality where such laws are not as liberal or as friendly to saving your life as others, but just know your local laws and be prepared. That's all you can do. Once inside, the woman grabbed a gun she kept in the home for defensive purposes. As the suspects pushed through the door, the woman fired, sending the men scurrying off. So it sounds like she didn't even hit one of them, but just a few shots, and they realized, you know what, we don't have the advantage anymore. We're going to boogie. So that's it. Those are the stories from this month's The Armed Citizen from the NRA American Rifleman magazine. I hope you've enjoyed these, and I hope you've learned something about what it takes to defend yourself with a gun or defend someone else with a gun. Remember, you're allowed to interject yourself into a situation where you have reasonable belief that that other person is in imminent danger of bodily harm or death. That doesn't mean you can walk up to two people who are arguing, determine which one you think is right, and then blow the other one away. It doesn't work like that. Imminent danger of bodily harm or death. And again, that's my local ordinance, that's my local laws. Make sure you know yours when you're using a firearm to keep from getting hung out to dry by the court system, because remember, juries, more often than not, don't know stories like these, aren't familiar with what it takes for an armed citizen to get through a situation where bodily harm or imminent death is being visited upon them. The mainstream media doesn't publish these stories, so they're not going to know what's happening. And they're going to think, this guy's walking around with a gun, just looking to blow people away. He's dangerous, and he needs to be taken off the streets. I highly recommend, if you do carry a gun, that you avail yourself of services that provide legal assistance to gun owners who are involved in shootings. There are a number of them out there, and I'm sure you can find one that best suits you. I'm not going to make any recommendations, as I don't feel I know your situation well enough to give you a specific reference. So, did you like this? Did you hate it? Let me know. This can be a monthly installment, as the American Rifle magazine is published every 4 weeks. If you really like it and want me to, I can try to do some active research and come up with some of these stories every week. I may only be able to find 2 or 3, but again, if you feel a higher frequency of this would be warranted, I'd be happy to do it. Finally, I apologize for the great length of time between this and my previous video. My wife just retired, and I've been spending a great deal of time with her, trying to help her get settled into a new life, a life without going to work every morning and coming home late that night. And she's finally getting into that point where she's comfortable in her own skin, so now I can spend more time in the studio. I love her to death, and I want her to be as happy as possible. So, take care of yourselves, be well, and as always, thanks for your attention. Bye-bye.